You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Our guest today is Cassie Clouser, now known as Cassandra Willow. She's a brand mythologist who helps entrepreneurs and creative agencies inspire and create memorable impressions through bold, story-driven graphic design and impactful brand messaging. She's a graduate of the American Writers and Artists Institute. She's also been a speaker for TEDX Youngstown, and she's a classically trained pianist from Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Music. And let's get into it with Cassandra Willow. Here we go.
Good morning, good day to both of you.
Good morning,
Hello.
Mr. Carlito.
Yeah.
Hello, Carlos.
All right, so good to see you. And Satch, always good to see you.
You too? Yeah.
We have today with us Cassie Clouser, also known as Cassandra Willow, which we're going to get into what all that's about in a little bit. And I'm just really glad that we could set this up and we could arrange this conversation because I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We love to talk about things on this show that are unique, in between the gap kind of things. Stuff that's intriguing, but also practical in the real world. And today, Cassie, you are one of those in between the gap kind of neat niche types of people in what you do. So this is going to be really cool to talk about.
Yeah. Welcome to the Authenticity Show.
Yes, thank you so much. I love kind of how organically this happened. I think I posted a photo that had this Authenticity Show mug in it.
Yeah.
Because
Nice.
my partner's been previously on the show, and then it was like, oh, the dots connected. And so really cool how that happened. And I'm so happy to have a conversation with both of you today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, when I saw that cup, I mean, it just lit up. I'm like, duh, you need to interview her too. She's got lots of great things to say. You always have cool things to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's always fun to have a little suspense and everything, but I think, it's kind of an immediate question, which is, you recently did a name change from Cassandra Clouser, which is how I met you originally, and I watched your TED Talk, which we can talk about in a little bit as well, and this new name, Cassandra Willow, which is really beautiful. Can you tell us about that evolution and what's prompted that and what that's about?
Yes. So almost 5 years ago, I got divorced, and I have 2 kids with my former partner. And so that name, my married name previously, was Clouser. And so as I've gone on my journey after divorce, the subject of identity and self-expression is really central to my purpose here, I feel. And so this topic of a name and, what's in a name, does a name carry, how much meaning does a name carry for any person? And I think that can really vary, because if you put a name in a vacuum to someone who's never heard of the language before, that might not necessarily create a meaning for them, right? Like, so if you put Clouser in a box to someone who's never heard of that before, no context, right? But to me, words can carry meaning. And so for me, there's this feeling of, even weighing around my journey. I have a new partner. I've had a partner, loving partner for the past few years. And even questions around, okay, will I get married again? And themes around marriage and name. And it's like, I feel like I want a new name, but it's not the path of marriage, like the difference between that sort of traditional path of I have a life partner and then I get married and I take their name as the femme person, right? To be a bit more nuanced and intentional around what is it that I want and how do I express as an individual and in a partnership. So I have a life partnership, but at this point we've decided, okay, we're not going to get married. Like we don't have to get married in order to dedicate our lives to each other. And so then there was this point of like, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to hold both. I'm going to be this relationship loving being and at the same time create my identity, right? Like there are all these connections to people and how to hold them all and to how to hold it to myself. And so I thought, months I was thinking about a name and just really feeling into it. And I first was starting with some Greek names. Like, so I'm half Greek. My mom was born in Greece. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to go all like powerful and choose a Greek name and be all fiery. But every time I tapped into my timeline, like I tapped into even like the end of my life, would this name feel true no matter what my experiences are, right? Like who am I at a deep level that's beyond nurture and environment? And usually my best ideas come in when I'm not trying to catch them, like the butterfly that'll sit on your shoulder. And I was taking a walk one day around the neighborhood and I saw again, it's not the first time I've seen it, but it feels like the first time I've seen it, this gorgeous willow tree. And I felt it. I just felt it all in my body. And, I've connected with that symbol of the willow. And there's so much strength and flexibility and connectedness, but also this presence, like it's distinct and yet connected at the same time. And so, doing my body checks of, if I'm both, like whether I'm checking in when I'm at my power, like I'm in my power, or maybe I'm really tired or I'm low, or like I'm at my peak or I'm at toward the end of my life. Is this still true? And that was yes. And so that's how I chose my name, or at least my name showed itself to me. And that's really, it's so precious to me to tap into these different levels of who are we outside of the more rhythmic and changing parts of our personality, and so that's how I arrived at that.
Wow. Well, and your name Cassandra is obviously Greek, very famous Greek name, but Satch, did you think, the image of a willow, it kind of has that feeling that she was talking about of embracing and like holding, right? Kind of like the leaves kind of come around and there's that feeling like
I
that.
love it. Most trees are trying to hold up the sky, but the willow's coming down to give us all a hug, and not to mention you come with your own aspirin. That's the other thing, willow bark.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Come with your own anti-inflammatory. So
and estrogenic.
There we go.
Yeah,
Handy.
That's really cool. I was just gonna say, is probably the first time you saw it in this way. That makes sense. There's a reason why it seemed like the first time.
Yeah. I thought that's really cool that you checked in with your timeline on that to see, like, even at the end of your life, so you are, if I'm saying this right, you are the brand mythologist, right?
Yes.
And so I can see why choosing the right name for your identity would have so much meaning. So a name, to me, it seems like it's something that's got to be representative of who you are now. But it sounds like you also were thinking about how does a name cause you to become in the future? You know, that's kind of the image I got from that. So I'm sure we're going to talk about the work that you do for people, you know, and all of that. But gosh, I guess it's the idea that sometimes we create a name that we have to live up to, you know, to get us somewhere. So it's an interesting idea. Yeah, thanks for sharing that process.
Yeah, and the fact also that you checked in with your body, that's so important. You know, Satch and I have a very sort of a nuanced sense of somatic awareness, and it's very much a part of the work that we do. And I would imagine that you're bringing that into your work too, because you know it's a huge part of your intuition, if not most of it. You know, is those somatic feelings.
Yes. I'll tell you a bit of a story. When I first started designing, there were times where I would create a design and it wasn't right, or it wasn't what I wanted to create, right? And my physical responses to design can be so strong that I can get nauseous if it's so far away from what it is or what's trying to come through. So I design very kinesthetically. I design very much like that's my guide. So even though what I'm doing is very visual, my primary, my sensory strengths are AK, auditory, kinesthetic. And so, you know, like when we're going to the grocery store and we're making a decision on which milk to buy or something, like there's some type of threshold that happens or indicator that people are conscious of or not, right? But there's something that indicates yes. So, and that's how I design. And my clients know that, and they can feel that. You know, they'll say that, yeah, I can tell that you're designing with your body, even though the expression is visual.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Very relatable as well. I thought I would just read you know, what you yourself wrote on your LinkedIn profile, because it's short and really, really clear for those who are listening. You know, this is Cassie Clouser's LinkedIn profile. It says, "I am Cassie Clouser, the brand mythologist, and I help entrepreneurs inspire and create memorable impressions through bold, story-driven graphic design. Everything is story. What we tell ourselves is story. Even what we tell ourselves about ourselves is story. Now, during COVID-19 pandemic, with many of us accessing the story of our communities through our screens, it's more important than ever to leave the digital world more inspiring and connected than we found it. I love working with entrepreneurs and creative agencies who are making the world a better place and need a soulful graphic designer to help bring new life to their vision." Love it. Wow.
Yeah, me too.
And under here, there's a class, Craft Your Brand Manifesto. That's that class, right? That you did, that I see listed here. That's so cool. What was that about?
Okay, so there were multiple intentions around that. So, and I think you can appreciate that there's like the low-hanging fruit of what a promise of a class is. And then there's like the teacher's deep intention of what shifts we want to make happen, right? Yeah. So that first level of Craft Your Brand Manifesto is about creating a statement about your business, or if you're a creator and you don't necessarily have a business, about your work, about your creative work, that is a declaration of why you're here. And it's this tapping into the big voice of your brand. So it's a context where we're not selling a product, that it's not as much the marketing type of voice where there's a situation and we want a certain specific outcome. It's really tapping into the deep purpose and calling out and activating your audience. And so that, you'll find companies like Apple and Nike and lots of companies will have manifestos, different styles of writing a manifesto, like here's to the rebels, right? Like it's this, in a way, the manifesto implies an archetype of itself, which is political, which is governing, which is and calling the governed as well. And so where you've got that first layer of, okay, I'd love a manifesto that I can have on my website or on my wall to remind me of why I'm doing this in the first place. Because even people who have been in their business a long time will forget. They'll forget that deep why, that deep call within them. And so that was one of another promise is something that you could re-inspire yourself and re-inspire your team with, and something to remember. It's in stone type of feeling. Another purpose of the workshop was for me to help. We were talking about the willow, was to help people to dig deep, to really get into their kinesthetics and the feeling of their brand, and to connect that to their voice. Because at the beginning of the workshop, there a lot, when I asked, what are your challenges? Like, what are your difficulties around writing in your brand voice? And some of the challenges are, they'll say, when I write, like, it doesn't come out right, or, I don't know exactly what my business does, and, that clearly. And so what I did was I went around the room and I had them talk about, why are you passionate about your business? What do you do in your business, right? So as a sort of icebreaker, right? Tell us about your business. And after everybody went through and did that, and I said, each one of you just clearly and powerfully told me your purpose in your business. So every time that you tell me or tell yourself that I'm not clear on what I do, that's just because you're accessing from a non-optimal space, right? Like you're trying to put on this writer's hat and then you're not accessing that deep voice. So that was like, by the end of the workshop, to hear the feeling and to hear the passion come through, that was a big outcome. Because I think that passion is magnetic. That passion is what is the momentum to keep them going, right? So it's like an energy or a state activation, right? And then the deepest purpose that I had, which I feel was like the sage behind the screen, was to have them access a part of their psyche that is the inner governor. To tap into the inner ruler, so that when it's conscious, that you can create your rules, right? Like it's time to tap into that voice. So, and it was really fascinating to see that in using language to help them activate that inner governor, inner ruler, different pictures or different metaphors came up for each person. And so one person started using metaphors of like mechanics and cars and driving and like the governor on a car. and that type of thing, and paying someone to take off the speed limitations of the car, that kind of thing. It's like, wow, I didn't think of mechanics. And then some were more like old medieval type concepts of king, queen, governor, right? And so there are different metaphors to access the same type of energy or instinct. So that's kind of a picture of the 3 different layers of what my goal was with those participants.
Yeah, thank you. When you said the phrase, they're not accessing that part of them, I could really relate with that, because there are times when I think my mind will make things more complicated than it needs to be, or anxiety. Just momentary anxiety, situational anxiety, will cause me to feel like I'm not able to access the very thing that I feel so much passion about. I could do it all day and all night long. The kinds of deeper topics that I like to dive into, and almost seemingly with no end to it. But then in certain given contexts, I've found myself sometimes not expressing from that place, as if I'm not even tapping that part of me while I'm talking about it. And that's probably to do with the way I learned and many other things. But work with you seems to be like helping people to recognize that they can draw upon that deep pool of passion and bring it out into the world, so that other people can understand why it's important, or why it could be of value to them. And if they don't have that, then you've got all these passionate human beings with skills and wisdom that aren't able to really get to their audience who might benefit from it. And what you're doing is creating a bridge for that, because without that bridge, it seems like you wouldn't get as much connection with those people that need it. So I could see that. I'm just saying, I could see how important that is.
Yeah. I've heard it said that mastery of anything is always just mastery of the basics. And what's more basic than remembering why we really want to do what we do? It's so easy to just lose the very basic thing that got us doing what we're doing in life. Like somebody has a business, and like you did, you go around the room. It's like, let's just get back to the basics. Why are you doing this? What drives you to do that? So I could see that being one of those processes that you have to keep going back to, because it constantly reveals again and again and again and again and again. What's the title of this book again? What's the title of this book again? What's the title of this movie again? Very interesting. Wow.
And
yeah.
I was just going to say, and branding is related to the concept of marketing and getting people to find you and to understand. I mean, depending on how you define those words, but those of us who are entrepreneurs or just getting started, even most people like that, myself included, have gone to multiple networking events and networking classes and things like that. And there's that concept of the elevator pitch, and some people who've got theirs memorized will almost assault people with not only their elevator pitch, but with their idea about how it's supposed to be, so that it's easy to go in with a feeling of insecurity because, I don't have a 30 gosh, I didn't know I would need to be prepared for a 15 and a 30 and you know what I mean? Like there's this idea that you're coming into a culture that has a bunch of preset ideas about how you're supposed to present yourself. And for some people, I can relate to this. The nervousness that ensues has nothing to do with our ability to deliver when it comes down to working in our particular chosen field. But it can lead to a feeling of, oh my God, maybe I'm not good enough. What I have to say is not polished enough. And there's a kind of a culture around that. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but there's a culture around that. Like it has to be a certain way. I like the way you're approaching it. Even the term brand mythologist is cleaner in that sense, because it's not being associated with those situations I was speaking of, but it does cover that in a way.
Yes. Yeah. So you see a piano behind me. So I'm going to use this as a metaphor for what we're talking about right now. So before I was in design, my first career was in classical music. So it's an interesting parallel that part of what I do on my journey with my clients is to help them feel confident being seen in a way that they feel comfortable and authentic, right? And I think that's something that I return to, that if someone feels nervous about presenting themselves, that they tend to be less nervous if they feel like they're really showing up and being themselves. But then what does that mean, being yourself? Because there's so many levels of the self, and there are masks too that we put on. In music, there are a couple of contexts. So like, let's say I've memorized a piece of music and I know that it's memorized, and I go out on stage, and every time I perform, I'm always nervous. So there's this many years of practicing and making friends with your nerves, and how to be creative and still put an output while having those feelings. And one of my professors in college would continuously reframe nervousness for us as excitement. And he said, actually, having some excitement, a certain level of excitement, will optimize your playing. It's going to give you the right amount of energy and focus. And so that sort of nuanced shift from nervous to excited, I think has to do, there are more layers in what you were talking about, and sort of worth, and is what I'm going to say good enough, and like there are those types of thoughts going on too, right? Which I'll touch on, but at least working with that meta feeling about the feeling at that level, right? If we can shift to, okay, I'm on, instead of I'm nervous. And I haven't mastered that, but it's something that I've practiced. And okay, so going along the sort of music metaphor, something that I've noticed is generally I'm okay with having the spotlight on me or speaking and presenting. And I think that's one of the gifts that I help metaphorically give to my clients, is like I show up in my Leo self, and like they absorb that or activate that within them, right? But one of the things that I've experimented with is there have been many times where I have to be on and like give my pitch. And I don't really go into environments like that very much anymore. But I have been in them when I've been hustling and trying to network. And so my experiment was like, okay, I'm going to try this one where I'm focusing on the words. How do I feel? How does it come across? Another time, I'm just going to focus on my state. Like, I don't really care what comes out of my mouth. I'm just going to focus on my state. And even if there are pauses, that's okay. And people at the end of the day aren't going to be going home thinking about, oh, I remember she paused for 3 seconds because she was thinking about what she was going to say. But they're going to remember how I made them feel. And, so if I say, I'm just going to show up with my light, even though there are different rules than I usually like, okay, so maybe I break the mold here. Maybe I don't give the same script that people are used to. And then you being you like that, they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember Carlos or Satch, and like, oh my gosh, there was something about him. I don't know what, but I feel like I need to reconnect with him. So it's like the body speaking more than the words. And that really helps me. It's like, that tends to have better outcome if I'm focusing on just being love or radiating light or just channeling what comes through. Is that helpful around?
Yeah, that was really good. I mean, it basically, when you were talking about anxiety or worry converting into enthusiasm, that's really, really important takeaway. And it's hard to imagine being enthusiastic about, the fear, right? But it is really relatable to say, I'm enthusiastic about the thing I've spent a lot of time getting good at. That and being able to share that, to be enthusiastic and energized about that. So when the shift of the focus goes towards enjoyment and who you really are, like you said, you checked in with your body, and when you focused on the words, how that felt versus focusing on showing up and being the light, and and at that element of being sitting in yourself and enjoying what you're doing, that's something to be excited about. So yeah.
Yes.
You're giving me images of the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin, right? Because the crocodile, like he was very, very clear on his mission, was to show everybody else how beautiful these animals are that people think aren't beautiful. Look at this beautiful little snake, she's naughty, and like when are we hearing somebody talk about a snake being beautiful with a cute little bum, and you're like, what? But it's contagious, you know what I mean? Because he knows he knew where he was coming from, and like you could feel his enthusiasm, and it's like it aligns you immediately with his mission. So I'm just
Yes.
Steve Irwin
Well,
fan, but yeah.
I love that, because his melody, his energy and his voice, I might not be able to repeat back to you what he said in an episode, but his sound and his energy stays with me. And so I thought of an interesting thought experiment of, what if you're in a context where the people listening to you don't understand your language, like they don't speak English, and that's okay, by the way, like that rules off. You don't have to understand the words. Like if you were being heard without context, how would that come across? And I feel like with Steve Irwin, it doesn't matter what language you speak, even if you don't understand English, you would get it. There's a transmission happening about these animals. So.
Yeah. And the other thing is this discussion about nervousness being excitement, right? I specifically remember times when all I saw was enthusiasm, but he was holding a dangerous animal with like venom, and he would say, right now I'm shaking, and he'd hold up his hands. I'm like, I couldn't tell the difference between his fear and his enthusiasm, so because there's such a fine line. But interesting stuff. So could you talk to us a little bit about, like, what is the process that you take a client through? So you're the brand mythologist. How do these things all come together to do this thing that you do?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, first, in my name, in my doing business as the brand mythologist, it indicates I'm doing something with mythology, right? And so there are the more obvious parts of what I do, which are branding design, logo design, style guide, graphic design, website design, all those very practical, utilitarian. I use this for my business. But in the beginning, with quite a few of my clients, I I consciously take them through a process of discovering what their brand mythology is. And the point of this is, you know how I was talking about the willow in the beginning of the call, right? That in a way can be interpreted as a mythology because there are stories, and I mean, think of Avatar, for example, right? There are associations in our culture with different things. And also objects or faces of archetypes are a way for humans to recognize something, right? Like when you put a face to an instinct or an energy, it's easier to remember and it's easier to connect with. So, connecting with the archetype of Robin Hood, right? Like if I say Robin Hood, there's a whole collection of feelings and meanings that go along with that energy, right? It's a face to an instinct. And so, with mythology as opposed to story in general, so to me, mythology is a category of story. And story is a trending thing in branding, and it's effective, right? And mythology, really, I use that specifically because one of what my passion and practice is, and two, who I'm attracting. So it's like both sides, that I tend to attract spirituals, intellectuals, public service workers, anthropologists, psychologists, like people who would hear mythology and their ears would perk. I'm speaking to them intentionally, like these are the people that I want to work with. And that to me, at a deep purpose level, mythology and the arts are a way to heal the mind. And that's part of whether I'm in business or in a different context, that my branding work and my visuals that come through are a way to reintegrate and to heal the mind. So that's there's a whole big conceptual part of my process for some of my clients where we make conscious these archetypes that they represent and archetypes that their audience represent, and then how they interact. So it's not just about the business itself. You know how a lot of times in branding work, the focus is on how the business brings value, what the business's promise is, how the business is attractive. In the work that I do, I want to round it out. I don't want it to be like business is the lighthouse and then everybody else is the fans and they're kind of small, in the distance. I want to magnify the audience as well. And what I tap into is what the archetypes are in the audience. So what is their mastery? And what is emerging? What are archetypes emerging in the audience that they need help activating? And there's a reason that the business is attracted to the audience. And so I flip the mirror. It's like, what lights you up? Who do you want to work with that you just are on fire in the morning to do that? Like you can have, I feel that, romantic relationships aren't the only context where we can feel love, right? It's not that we have a romantic relationship with our clients or our audiences, but it is possible to wake up in the morning and feel something akin to that, of that deep love, where there's a momentum in that, right? You don't need self-discipline to reach out. when it's that aligned. And so it's like finding that love with the audience and highlighting them as well. So I would say that's a unique way in which I work with my clients. And there's a lot of conceptual brand work that is common to, values and feelings and differentiation and all that conceptual work before going into visual design. So, and then once we get into design, then the challenge is telling the story. So it's like the brand is the story and the design is the storytelling.
Yeah.
And another way to see it is design is paraverbals. So where you've got your copy is the words, the design is the body language of the brand. And so like, how do we bring that to life in an aligned way that's going to activate the archetypes the audience wants to activate? So, yeah. So it's concept, so mythology, so kind of the regular stuff that you normally do with brand development, brand design, and then any other type of collateral after that is the big picture that I do.
Beautiful. Wow. I was really impressed with that idea of amplifying the audience and looking at it from, from that side, because, oftentimes you read a slogan or, a mission statement or something from a business. And I think all of us, we read something like that and they say something about we're passionate about XYZ and 1, 2, 3. And we all kind of have a way of kind of going, yeah. Every business has to say something dumb like that. You know what I mean? I know that I catch myself doing that all the time, and because it's very much coming from the business. And it's refreshing to, like you said, turn that mirror around and looking at it from who we want to work with. That's very, very interesting to me. Wow. So you spoke about, mythology and archetypes. So that's obviously something that you have looked into and, have studied a bit, and I'm sure learned a lot about, as you've gone through this process. Could you talk about, like how you bring mythology into business design, or how do you help somebody identify an archetype or archetypes that are symbolic of what they're trying to accomplish?
Okay. Yeah. That's a great question, because in a way it feels like infinity to what you could tap into. So, and that's something important about my process, is that I don't stick to one archetype system. Like, here's the system. Here are Jung's 12 archetypes: rebel, citizen, caregiver, sovereign, etc. And you have to pick from these 12, and we're going to do it this way. That's not how I do it. There are so many different archetype systems, and each person gravitates toward certain metaphors. So it's kind of like detective work in understanding how a person sees the world. And, I don't put that in my agenda, like, okay, I'm analyzing how you see the world, but that's what I'm doing. And so I'll give you some practical examples. Yeah. So I have a client who is a therapist and works in sex therapy, counseling, and that kind of thing. And so I tend to listen to metaphors. So I have a conversation with her, and animals come up over and over and over again. I'm like, bam, there we go. So that's the metaphor system that I'm going to tap into, because to me, most anything can be an archetype. Most anything that is a repeated pattern in the world. It doesn't have to be a person, it doesn't have to be an animal, it can be a color, it can be a number, it can be a pattern, right? That to me, yeah.
I just wanted to pause you before you continue, because I believe there might be some people who don't even know what an archetype is.
Oh, okay.
Good point. Yeah, we should. Yeah, let's define for them. Yeah.
Okay. So an archetype is a repeated, observable pattern that gives some type of universal meaning beyond an individual experience. So that's more of like the Jungian definition of what an archetype is. Okay. And so it's a way to tap into an energy or an instinct, right? That's another thing that Jung says, is that an archetype is a face for an instinct. It's a way to give form to an instinct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, what's an example? Let's say the rebel archetype in Jung's 12 archetypes is the face of rebelling against the old, right? Destroying the old and creating the new and more optimal. And like I was saying before, an archetype doesn't have to be a person. Think of, what's a great example? The number 3 as a pattern versus the number 4.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 tends to show up in patterns and can be interpreted as a more spiritual, a connection between human and spirit, where the number 4 might have more earthy manifestations, right? More human, more structure. And you can go at the surface and sort of feel into what different patterns mean to you, but then there's also deep structure as well, that I'm sure if you go into biology, if you go into a microscope, right? Like when you see structures of 3 versus 4, there's different functions. Okay. So I really like that idea that an archetype is a function or an instinct that goes beyond gender, race, upbringing, right? Like country, tapping into a universal language, where a lot of times in marketing training, there's some schools of thoughts where it's like, define your avatar. And what are their demographics and what magazines are they reading at night and et cetera. And this is more of like tapping into a specific function. So
it's funny because avatar doesn't mean that at all. If you go back to the meaning of an avatar, an avatar traditionally means like a manifestation of the divine in human form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like Christ as an avatar for God the Father.
Right. Yes. Right. Right.
Or Krishna, etc.
Yeah.
Yes. And in Jung's work too, that's how he describes the function of archetypes is it's beyond the ego, right? That archetypes are a way for the divine to help mature the soul for the path of maturing over the lifetime, right? It's like outside of the ego in the way that we're bringing in these instincts to create a balanced, whole, integrated soul. So
yeah, he saw them in his own personal life. We know from his diaries and notes and things like that he saw them as actual living things, not just psychological concepts, the way most people interpret Jungian archetypes in that sort of purely mental way. He saw them as existing outside of the individual and being much in the same way that say Christians believe in a Holy Spirit. There was an externalized existence that was beyond the individual perception. That was a real tangible thing, or tangible intangible. But yes, he saw them as spiritually alive.
Yeah, very animate, Yeah. Well, it's like, there's, anything that can be conceived of. Just the simplest things like the archetype of a mother, the archetype of a father, the archetype of a child. I guess John Lennon knew what he was talking about. There's nothing you can sing that can't be sung, nothing you can do that can't be done. It's like, well, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's right. It has to exist there. It had to exist before we could do it, in a way, Okay. With these archetypes and things like that, so you help the clients like identify one, or identify like a cluster of them, or and then you weave this into, because mythology is story, right? So how do you weave this into a story?
So I'll return to my example with my client, who seemed to be very drawn to animals and used a lot of animal metaphor in her speaking. So that's part of my discovery in the process, is what archetypes or what system activates my client. And so in this context too is more of solopreneurs. When I get into teams and small businesses, it's a little bit of a different process, because then there are lots of different archetypes and systems that I'm tapping into. So with this client, okay, spirit animals, that's her jam. And so for her, what really spoke to her was the cheetah.
Okay.
And the cheetah is a presence that she wanted to help activate in her clients, which is not even having to try to be powerful, like that, just that presence alone was a quick way to communicate what the promise is. And so with some clients, we will go more literally with the design. Like with her, she was such an overt, direct personality that the cheetah became part of her brand. So like her brand, in the fonts, the fonts were just really, they were bold and chiseled, and I had and an R, I had a tail hanging down, like like I just went all out, right? And we had, yeah, exactly. And cheetah is in her, there are cheetah images in her brand palette, right? But also there's one thing that's really important to me, is that I am not showing ever a one-dimensional stereotype brand, that I'm building in yin and yang, but I'm building in a lot of nuance, right? So in addition to her being very drawn to animals, she's very drawn to nature. So, animals are of nature, but there was a very strong water element. So there are the elements: water, fire, air, metal, earth, etc. Right? That's a system that people tend to be drawn to as well. Like what element is coming through? And so with her, rivers, right? So what's a water element that has motion, that has more of that cheetah energy, and that's a river. So you see like the nuance and the combinations, that this is not pond water, this isn't ocean water, this is river. And so that power created this balance of yin and yang. So I use tons of water imagery, and then so there's that symbolic imagery, and then we're also saying, to what level do we want to represent what you do? Because in her work, she also didn't want to show images of people having sex and like be that stereotypical or direct. So there's this sophistication and classiness that comes in as well, and as creating images where we're hinting at the promise, but in a way where the images don't disqualify the person looking at them, right? And that can be a challenge in creating brand imagery, is that if you're showing images of people and they're distinct, like, will someone immediately say, oh, that's not me, and not connect? Right? So there's a story that we're showing for her in increasing sensory receptivity, sexual creativity. And so I showed like close up of a hand on a window with like water droplets, or a lot of brightly lit silhouette type things, right? And so it's kind of the mix of feeling and the symbolic at the same time to create a both powerful and soft brand that she felt like this is right in pocket and the level I want to show up. And she loved that. So
Beautiful.
it's an example.
Yeah.
Makes
Very
sense.
creative.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Wow, I like that. So yeah, it's as you're describing all that, I'm thinking, yeah, oceans don't run and ponds don't run, but cheetahs and rivers do. So I was like, can't help it. The brain just wants to attach to those kinds of ideas and go with them. Wow, very interesting. One of the things, before we started recording, we were just chatting with you a little bit, and you kind of started mentioning something about external archetypes and how they relate to each other. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, and like what that means and the kind of work that you do.
So we talked a bit about internal and psyche and that kind of thing, but what you're pointing to here, which is also very important, is how do different archetypes externally interact with each other. So here, let me think of an example to use instead of trying to use theory. One of the things that I'm researching right now is romantic attraction. And so I'm reading a few books on attraction and why we pick the mates that we do. Because I'm looking for, I'm so much focused on lateral thinking, like how can I take one context and see how it can improve another context? Okay, so if you think about something in your life, like think of a partnership that you've had, and your personality and your partner's personality. So you might have different temperaments, you might have different instincts, you might have different gifts. I can use my partnership as an example, but I would really encourage you or whoever's listening to think of an embodied situation where it's like you're in a situation where you've got two archetypes that have really been drawn to each other. So there's also, you've heard different philosophies or different sayings like opposites attract, but also birds of a feather flock together, right? So what's the, I'm sure many of us have been in an opposites attract relationship where it wasn't that great. Like they're so opposite, that they were so polarized, right, that long term it didn't work out, right? So how does it work? Like some personalities and archetypes draw their polarity, and that works really well. And some archetypes draw complementary archetypes or similar archetypes, and that works really well. So in my partnership, you both know Jonathan. We have a lot of similar primary archetypes. But we also have a lot of opposites. So we both are really great negotiators. We're very empathic. We care about communication. We care about self-expression. We care about improving the world in that way. And we highly value relationships and making relationships loving and better. We tend to, our confrontation style or resolution style is very similar, but we have complementary archetypes within each of us that exalt each other, right? So I tend to be like, I have gifts in fast creativity. So I'm a creator, I have a goal, I'm high passion, I get it done. And like, even though I'm a very open-minded, imaginative person, I'm big picture. Like I've got this big vision. And Jonathan has this gift of like this nuance, these details, this builder, and he's steady, like very much like an earth quality, like earth and air. And I've got this fire, right? And in a lot of ways, since we've been together, it's like what's been activated for me and seeing him is that I can bring things more into form and things that have more long-term sustaining potential, right? So his nuance builder exalts the creator. Okay.
Yeah.
It brings the creator through. And so to me, that's a personal way to explain attraction in relationships, especially when we want to build long-term relationships, because there are ways to attract your audience that will get their attention. But there's also a difference between attention and attraction and selection. So if you're on Facebook and your eye catches something, it's like, ooh, what was that? But will you actually select? Are they actually giving you like the deep long-term need that you have? So if I kind of take that context, that relationship attraction, or what you have in your mind of like something that's worked, and you overlay that with business, I'll give you an example there. So I work with a marketing agency that I'm rebranding and tapping into their archetypes and their audience's archetypes. And their audience is filled with very passionate visionaries, healers, flowing, like not contained kind of thing, but they know they've got this big purpose in the world. And they're overwhelmed by marketing. And so with this agency that I'm branding, their gifts, their dominant archetypes are warrior and engineer. So there's like this combination that we're showing in visuals and in word, that the engineer and the warrior helps to exalt the healer. It helps to bring the healer into the world, and it helps to activate missing resources or sleeping instincts, right? Like I feel overwhelmed by marketing. I want to put my work out into the world, but what's missing, right? That engineer energy. So, that's an example of there's an attraction. There can be an attraction between the healer and the warrior, an attraction between the healer and the engineer. Like being on a mission to find a tool or an instinct there. So does that answer your question in terms of?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think so. It really helped to hear the idea of the missing archetypes. Like what was missing in getting this across or getting this out there. That's really helpful. Yeah, that's neat. So basically, let's for anybody who's interested, in your services and things. Let's kind of just officially run through the list. You help build websites and slogans, and kind of take us through what's on the menu.
Yes. Okay. So brand consulting. So the category of the conceptual, I often hear, who am I? Like, what does my business stand for? And those in identity crisis, right? Whether they're starting a business or they want to rebrand, like their business no longer matches what they've evolved to. Like there's something bubbling up within, like we're ready to have a renaissance.
Okay.
So defining that. So there's that brand strategy, branding design. So that's like logo design, your colors, your typography, creative direction, right? So that's a seat that I love to be in, is to be the creative director for a brand or for even event branding. That's something that I do a lot. Like, for example, I'm for my local TEDX Youngstown. I've been their branding lead for about 4 years now. So putting together a theme and a brand for an event, that's another thing that I often do. And then, translating a brand into graphic design and website design. And so in terms of writing, I help with key messaging, large structure. I don't do detailed copywriting because I don't really go in and research and then become the entire voice of a brand, but I help give the container.
Okay.
So, that's the big picture of the menu.
All right. Very cool.
Do you have those connections, like for someone that comes to you, say, like you create the container, you also have copyright people that you can recommend and things like that?
Yes.
That's awesome. That's wonderful.
Very, very cool. Wow.
Did you have something else to add?
No, please, Carlos, go for it.
I was just going to say, you mentioned the TEDx talks, and I really enjoyed that TEDx talk. I thought it was expertly delivered, and it was meaningful. It brought tears to my eyes. It really hit my heart, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. I appreciated it very much, so much so that I shared it with a lot of other people. And it was, how our decisions reshape our beliefs. That's the name of the TEDx talk, if anybody's looking for it. How our decisions reshape our beliefs. Cassie Clouser, just look that up. My question to you is, you've made a lot of decisions, changed your name, you have partnered up with Jonathan, you have decided to open up into this world as a brand mythologist, moving from primarily professional musician to this. How have these decisions reshaped your beliefs?
Wow. Okay, that's a great question. Since I gave that talk and since I wrote that talk, there's been a bit of a discussion within my mind of a sort of chicken and egg kind of thing. Is what comes first, the decision, the belief, the action.
Mhm.
And I feel like I have a bit of a more nuanced belief system around that than 5 years ago when I gave my talk.
Mhm.
I think that there is an element of that before a decision, there's at least an opening of a belief, right?
Mhm.
Like the decision itself isn't the only driver. So I would say I've made a lot of decisions and experienced a lot of things. I think the biggest thing that has shifted for me in my belief system is to not take reality as literally or as seriously.
Mm.
And one important life experience that's happened since my talk is this past October, my mom passed away.
Sorry.
Thank you. She's to me young to pass, but she was 56, 57, and passed from stage 4 brain cancer. That to us kind of came out of the blue, and it was like a 9-week hardcore journey to the unexpected end,
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I think that, and I don't mean to avoid your question, but I think that it's important to communicate that what's really present and what affects my belief system currently right now, and that an experience outside of my decision making, like I didn't decide for mom to pass,
Yeah.
that really shifted my belief system. It didn't change it into a new set of beliefs. It really, what it did was it cracked it open. It just cracked my belief system open, where it's like dissolving and breaking apart and starting to rebuild.
Mhm.
And so I would say that through my experiences, one of the most beautiful meta beliefs is that I can create my belief system, that I can restructure my belief system, as well as I think I'm able to now tap in a little bit more into your question too, because I kind of had to go that big place first.
Sure.
Is that in the decisions that I make creatively, whenever I follow my passion, it keeps affirming and it keeps mirroring back and telling me that you're not here on accident. And there's also that sort of Leo character arc of like,
Say that. That's a very
right?
Leo thing to say. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Right? The Leo character arc of I need attention. And that's something that in the beginning, and even as a child, I was very much the ham and very much needed attention. On one level, not to just like, oh, she's doing that just to get attention, but there's like a deeper,
Mhm.
there's a deeper piece there, right?
Like
And
your
that honoring, yeah, and honoring that there's a need in each person for attention and the calling of attention. But at that child, really, I see that as like the child level, that stepping and owning my creative gifts and really stepping into that creative director position on many levels, like business and in my life, that's generative for me.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not bad or self-centered, that I can be balanced and show up and give joy and healing through my work. And so I would say that's my character arc right now, is like balancing that energy.
Well, I mean, attention is one expression of love. And a lot of those things, creating is an expression of love. Love, if you dive into the layers of what love can mean, obviously there's love of what you do, the love of your partner, your sexual partner, your mate. There's a kind of love you feel platonically for your friends that can be very, very deep, or more on the surface, depending on how deeply you go with it. There's a love of what you do, the true. Some people really feel love as they're expressing what they do. There's so many different aspects of love. I mean, taking out a blank canvas and splashing some paint on there can be love for some people. I can absolutely see this as an expression, to use the Leo archetype as a model here, as the sun, in the center, and needing some of that reflection and being totally okay with that, and recognizing that might be part of not only your vision, but a sense of purpose. Like you're here doing that because that's who you are, identity, but also because of what it ultimately creates by you being you. When you're authentically you fit into a larger picture that is authentically itself and has a bunch of parts. So you're fitting in and being the perfect puzzle piece for a very large picture. And I like that a lot. And I love how you came to the answer, because it reminded me of these three components that I've thought about for a while now. I had some deaths in my own world over the last 10 years. Some horrific things happened, and it caused me to reflect on decisions, belief, and experience. Those three, almost like those things. So people can say, like in personal growth circles, well, you believe that. And it's like, not necessarily. I can have an experience that teaches me something. And then it can become a belief. Or I can believe something that can lead to an experience through decisions. Decisions can change beliefs. Beliefs can change decisions. They can change your experience, both of those two things. So there's an interplay between those three concepts. And I don't know, it just fell in as I was listening to you talk about that. I was thinking about all three of those things: decisions, beliefs, experiences, and how that all relates. Sometimes one seems to come first before the other, depending on how far you zoom in or zoom out to look at it.
Right.
Get a little different look. It's like Newtonian physics versus quantum physics. I mean, it could look completely different when you zoom in than it does when you zoom out.
Yeah. And you were talking about reality, Cassie, and so which reality is it? Is it the Newtonian one, or
Right.
well, which can we define our realities here? It's one of those tough things. Decisions. Gosh, I guess decisions are certainly a reality, aren't they? We've all had them. Oh my gosh. And then I think it's tough, all of us, everybody on earth is gonna lose people we love, and that is a reality, that goes, beyond our beliefs and even wishes, but it's a reality we have to create our stories around, and regardless somehow, right? We got to be crafty in how we do it. So. Goodness. Wow. So Cassie, how do people find your work? Because I think it'd be really cool to see some of this. A picture says 1,000 words, and it sounds like what you do for people is really deep and hard to summarize.
Yes.
I see the need for it. It's really what everybody wants in business, is this thing that you're offering. And so tell us how we find you. How does everybody find you? How do they see what you've done, how would they get started with you?
So I have a website. So if you go to thebrandmythologist.com, you'll see a couple of different portfolios and some explanation of my work, as well as there's even a get started button, for inquiries, so I can learn a little bit more about you. And for anyone who's interested, that would help start the process. So, but whether someone's interested in branding or not, my hope is that my work touches like beyond context, and so I even have an art gallery. I mean, I'm not selling my art, but just even the art itself to tap into what's going on within the beauty there. So
just real quick, Carlos, you're the Zoom host, right?
Yeah.
Can you under share screen, could you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, hang on a second. Let me just take a peek here.
See, Carlos and I are getting old, Cassie, so the glasses have to come on, when we're these are the kinds of things we're dealing with, right? So that's our reality,
Well, my visual problems are hidden because I've got contacts in.
Very good, very good. So Carlos, at the bottom where it says share screen, if you click on that, there should be an option that says allow others to share screen.
Multiple participants can share.
Yeah.
Okay, I just clicked it.
Click that. Okay, cool. So if you don't mind, Cassie, I'm very naughty, and so I just brought up your website here. So let's take a look.
Wow, look at that.
That is great. Wow. Oh my gosh.
Maximize that, Satch?
Let's see. Can I? Let me see what I can do. Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, I got way too many things going on here. Let's see. I think I'm a little limited in my because I'm doing this through Zoom here, but I have way too many things open. But
very striking, Cassie. That whole look with the lightning flash, the red dress, everything. That's a perfect, that really grabs the attention right away.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, look at that too.
Continuing the legacy. Wow.
Love that.
I see that the lightning continues. Wow.
Yes, you got it.
Wow. That's it. That's it. Wow. So you have a gallery here, maybe portfolios up at the top here. Is this art gallery or client work? Let's look at art gallery just because we're so curious around here. Of course, everything slows down on Zoom.
Yeah, and these are big. It's because it's a gallery. It's going to take longer to load too because of all of the images.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, it might continue to be naughty, but let's see. But yeah, this is interesting. The whole picture says 1,000 words thing. I mean, it's I guess we're already at the client work, right? Here we are. Oh,
whoa.
Look at that.
Every great design is a story. Look at that. He's a man in this, it almost looks like a catacomb or some deep, deep, deep cellar somewhere holding a torch with a hood on. And it's like he's just going into the depths and saying, wow, and lighting it up. That's so cool.
Wow. That's great. Wow. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Fantastic.
Beautiful stuff. So I think this really helps tie it together to be able to see this. So very, very cool. Okay. So that's how people can find you, thebrandmythologist.com.
And it looks like you, Satch, in the lower left-hand corner of the screen.
Oh, this handsome devil over here,
exactly,
or
holding the clipboard there. That's you, Satch.
I like how it says genius mapping. Yes. I mean, there we go. It's just an archetype. That's all. Yeah, it's just. So yeah, very, very cool. Wow. Wonderful. The blossoming lotus. Okay. All right. Well, I'll stop sharing. And all right, just thought it'd be fun to pull that up and just kind of take a look at your stuff. So
yeah, I'm glad you did.
Good call.
Yeah.
Good call.
Okay. Gosh. So, Cassie, anything else coming up on the agenda? Anything people need to know about, or we
Upcoming
kind of covered it?
classes,
Yeah, classes.
offerings of any kind?
I have no upcoming offerings.
Okay.
But yet, but there, anyone listening is free to follow me on Facebook.
Worthwhile, by the way, I will add worthwhile following Cassie on Facebook because she asks really interesting questions that gets people throwing in their ideas, and I just like it's hard not to want to jump in and join the conversation because of the way you ask the questions.
Yes, thank you. So really my journey right now is I'm not really putting a lot out there. I'm in this beautiful space where I have that security and assurance to go in and do a deep body of work. But if people are interested in wanting to see when a next event comes out, following me on Facebook or keeping an eye out on my website, then you would see when a next event pops up.
Do you maintain your LinkedIn fairly regularly? Like, is that also a place where people could connect and see offerings?
Yes, that's another platform where I put all of my offerings as well.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
All right. Gosh, Cassie. Yeah. Go ahead.
I do just have one just a fun question. Not that the other questions weren't fun, but this is only for fun. Authenticity. What can you share with our audience about your understanding? Something that would be good to hear about authenticity.
So this has been a topic that I've really explored. We were talking about reality, when something in your experience doesn't match what you think is supposed to happen and then things shake up. There's this desire to return to what is real or to discover what is real and what feels like home. And I think that, looking for indicators of what is authentic and when am I being authentic, and there's so many different levels to that, where like I'm here today and I'm wearing makeup and I washed my hair for you guys. But if you saw me earlier this morning,
it smells great.
Matter.
Yeah.
You're welcome. So, I had plant matter in my hair. What is the authentic self? And it doesn't have to fit one thing. It's not a static thing. To me, the self, like, it's continually checking into, do I feel open in my thinking and in my behaviors? Do I feel at home? Do I feel like the rails are off? Or these are sort of images that I tap into. Like, usually my state is an indicator for my authenticity. So my state, or if I have certain thought patterns that, let's say, I know those thought patterns aren't really me, those aren't authentic to me. And though sometimes we can be in thought patterns and it can be tough to get out of them, there are cues, right? So, for example, if I start hearing language in my head about good and bad, or like I'm being a good this, or I'm being a bad this, it's a cue of like, okay, maybe this isn't the thought realm that I want to be in or that I feel at home in. And so I think it's really about, there's a lot of exploration for me. But then again, just driving it home, like if I'm feeling open and real, like as in reality, like, to what level do I feel real is an indicator for me for authenticity.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Nice.
Thank you for asking.
And thank you for this wonderful deep dive with us into what you do and your thoughts and feelings and experiences. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise.
Same. Thank you so much for having me on the Authenticity Show. And great to meet you, Satch.
Well, yeah, good to meet you, Cassie. This is great. Yeah. We always, we meet so many cool people doing this, and we can sometimes dive really deep and you really get a sense of another person, so I feel like I have all these great new friends, that we just immediately dive in a short period of time and you get to know each other. So it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I guess we'll bring this to a close. Lovely to see both of you and converse with both of you in an authentic way. I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
It's been good to have you.
We'll be seeing both of you online.
Sounds good.
See you soon. Okay, bye guys.
All right.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Authenticity Show with your hosts, Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Very special thanks to our guest today, Cassandra Willow. My name is Oliver Althoen. I produce this podcast, and I also wrote the theme music, which you're listening to right now. Please find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And you can find our website at authenticityshow.com. Thanks for listening, and have an authentic day.